New polls just out from Fox Business Network give Senator Ted Cruz a 10-point lead in the upcoming fight for Wisconsin. What's more, this is the second poll in a week showing Donald Trump taking a hit with women voters. Now some political writers are starting to ask whether the frontrunner may have peaked in his support. Joining me now, syndicated columnist, Fox News contributor, and author of the book Things That Matter, Dr. Charles Krauthammer. Charles, good to see you. And that's the question, whether, I know others have said it many times, but whether you believe we have seen a Trump peak and the momentum is shifting in this race.
Well, look, I've said it many times, and I was wrong every single time. We've heard the expression peak Trump about as often as we've heard peak oil for the last 50 years, and oil is gushing all over the world. So, look, I think it is likely that he recovers, but if there's going to be one incident or one series of incidents happening together, as we've seen in this week, that would actually stop his momentum and actually put a question mark in some of his supporters, this would be it. This was a terrible week. And there's something about the abortion question. It's not just that it will alienate a lot of particularly suburban, moderate, just right of center women. That, I think, is a constituency that he has been able to hang on to some extent. But I think it's a deeper question. Donald Trump, people like me who've been accused of being elitist, intellectual, pointy-headed snobs about this, have said that he doesn't know anything, that his policy credentials are 1 inch deep, and on a ton of issues he doesn't seem to know what's going on. We, of course, have been denounced as elitist establishment, fine. For most issues, people say, who cares if he knows about the nuclear triad, Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Quds? That's stuff he can learn in a half hour. That's fine. But abortion is the central issue of the conservative movement for the last 30 years in terms of social issues. It is a deep one that anybody involved has thought through. The fact that he could give such an answer, which is so far afield from what the pro-life people and the movement think, tells you, A, that he's not actually thought it through. And I think it might actually raise doubts in his supporters who have stuck with him through all the other incidents and gaffes to say, well, if he hasn't thought through this central issue, well, what has he thought through on other issues, and what does he actually know about the other issues that we have ignored up until now? What
do you make of these, the poll numbers when it comes to where he stands? 67% of the country has an unfavorable view of him. 3/4 of women, 2/3 of independents, 80% of young adults, 85% of Hispanics, nearly half of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents all have an unfavorable view of him.
Well, the only thing you can say that if he's not able to change these numbers, say he becomes the nominee, then he will lose in a landslide. I know people talk about he will put certain of the Midwestern states in play where Reagan Democrats will be recalled, the ones who stay home, the ones who have defected back to being Democrats are going to come back. Yes, but this cannot outweigh what would be a demographic tsunami.
And we've seen, some within the Trump supporters starting to openly voice concerns about him and sound more open-minded to Ted Cruz and start to complain more about Trump's behavior. Even Ann Coulter was out there complaining about his tweet about, Heidi Cruz's looks, comparing her unfavorably to his own wife, Melania. I mean, Ann Coulter, who's been a staunch defender of his. And the question is whether you think Trump's behavior in the past week is really behind some of that softening we appear to be seeing among some supporters, or whether it's something else, that they're just starting to have general doubts about the man they've been backing.
When Ann Coulter calls you mental, you've got a problem. And I say that as a retired psychiatrist. Although you could argue that two negatives cancel each other out, but still, there's a lot of trepidation. I think the abortion question and all the other stuff that went on, the charging of assault of his campaign manager and Trump's furious defense of his and essentially insulting the woman who was involved. The fact that, as Ann Coulter has pointed out, he's mocking the looks of his opponent's wife I mean, and doing all this at once, it makes people think as to the temperament issue, as to the knowledge issue, and as to the seriousness issue. In my view, that's been around for 9 months. So as an observer, I'm surprised it took this long.
Before I let you go, do you still think that the Sanders thing is a mirage, or do you think there's something going on there?
No, it's a real phenomenon, but the whole thing has been cooked against him, with all those establishment figures who are going to be the superdelegates, the ones who are not elected. The math is almost impossible. I think he will be a force, he will be a figure, he will speak at the convention, and he will leave a legacy. For example, I could see him as a way of making a peace, and he would have to, because Hillary's going to need his supporters, particularly the young. He could say, here's who I want as the vice president, somebody who would carry on his legacy. So he's important. He's made himself important, but he's not going to be the nominee, and he better not, because I still have no money on him.
Charles, always a pleasure.
Thank you.